Hello, everybody. We're talking about global health jobs today. It's Greg Martin here, and I'm here with David Stuckler. David, do you want to say hi?
Hey, great to join you. It's been too long.
Yeah, always good to talk about global health. You are definitely an expert in the field, so I always learn a lot whenever we chat. Um, David, today there's a couple of things that we're going to do, which I'm really excited about. Firstly, obviously, we're going to take questions from the audience, and we've invited people on both your channels on LinkedIn and YouTube, etc., and mine. So we've got people watching from all over the shop now. We're inviting questions. So if you're watching this, stick your questions in on whatever platform you're watching. Put in your questions. We're going to try and respond to those. So definitely Q&A. But we're also going to just talk a little bit about how to use artificial intelligence to refine your job search. All right. So if I didn't say this, we're talking about global health jobs, where to apply, how to get your CV ready, how to prepare for an interview, the whole bang shoot. Right. So it's all about global health jobs. Put in your questions. There's a QR code. Now, above me over there's a QR code. If you scan that QR code in with your phone, so while you're watching this on your computer, scan that QR code in with your phone, it's going to take you to this page over here. And we will change the page from time to time, and I'll tell you when we're going to do it. And there'll be a question you can answer. So in this case, what are the biggest global health problems facing the world today? You stick in whatever you think are the problems, and then we'll kind of engage with that and talk about it. And there's a couple of things that have already been put in here, but stick in more. Bring us your thoughts. We'll go to other questions down the line as well, like what kind of organization would you like to work for in the global health space, for example, and you can answer those questions as well. So it's just a way of making this whole experience a little bit more interactive, a little bit more kind of it's you and me, and we're all in it together. Okay, David, you're in the research world. Anything new and exciting happening in the global health research space?
Well, I just want to say before diving in, Greg, I'm super excited about this method you're going to share to supercharge your job search because this isn't just global health. I know some students joining from my channel. Like, this is what I wish I could have done when I searched for jobs, even academic jobs or things outside of global health. This is the same kind of formula. You can lock a load and drop in whatever you're going to do. It's the same tips, the same flow, the same process. So I've got a lot to take away from this session, so you're all going to want to stick around and not miss this. Now, in global health, there are some few hot events that I've been paying close attention to. One is the World Health Organization, for the first time, is putting together a global commercial determinants of health report. And I
Yeah.
think of this as kind of like social determinants of health. When I was up and
Mhm.
coming training with Michael Marmot, the good and the great,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is almost like social determinants 2.0,
Yeah. It
getting
is.
really dealing with power, that third rail that's driving forward global health for good, for bad,
Yeah.
taking on conflicts of interest, and getting really serious about how to align power with the good for the public
Yeah,
and global health.
yeah. And I think that there's two sides to the sort of commercial determinants of health. There's the commercial interests that do things that do harm, and we need to be aware of those and have ways of engaging and addressing that. And there are commercial enterprises that do good, and we need to also be cognizant of that and find ways of facilitating that and working with them. And like there's companies that are building diagnostics that can be used for TB in Africa, for example. That's the sort of thing that we should get behind and make sure that they are. And there's good organizations doing that. I mean, a good one, for example, is Unitaid. Unitaid specifically invest in projects to impact on market dynamics to facilitate the pipeline of products for HIV, TB, and malaria. Well, it was HIV, TB, and malaria when I used to work there, but it's now been expanded into all sorts of nooks and crannies. I mean, they do absolutely amazing work. I'll just give a quick shout out. If you're interested in global health right now, there are jobs being advertised at Unitaid. I worked there. I loved it. Highly recommended if you're looking for a place to kind of get your teeth stuck into global health issues. You'll learn a lot. You'll do a lot of good. It's really, really cool. So
Just to book in that for a second, asking people who have worked at the place you want to go, always a good idea because
always a good idea.
people
Yeah,
have not
yeah.
had that glowing report of all global health employers that I've heard about. There are some, I don't want to poo-poo any of them, but there are some that
Yeah,
I won't
definitely.
point out.
And we should talk a little bit during the session today about networking, about speaking to people, about those personal contacts. Because in actual fact, when I
Definitely.
think back about my career in global health, most of the interesting jobs that I worked in came as a function of personal contacts with people. Now, that's not to say that I got shoehorned into the job because I was a friend of a friend. It's knowing people is a mechanism whereby you can become aware of a role that is really perfect for you and a good fit for you. And because people talk and they say, hey, there's a job coming up. And this is how, when I worked as the director of EMTC at CHAI, I had a professional network in that space. And there were people that were there saying, hey, we've advertised a job and we think you would be a good fit. Why don't you apply? Now, I applied and I had to compete with everybody else. And there was a whole interview, blah, blah, blah. But that professional network was, the first step to that process. So I always tell people that are looking for work in the global health space, network like mad, but don't do it in a way that's annoying. Get in touch with people, but don't bug them. There's an interesting, fine little balance there. While we're talking, David, I can see this little this word cloud is just kind of potting up a little bit.
Starting to fill up. I like this 28 responses. This is good.
Keep sticking your responses in there, and we'll have another look at that in just a minute. I think it's really nice. Climate change is big. I think that obviously that is important. And we're not going to jump right into the AI story now, but just a little bit of a prelude for people that are watching. Using features, something like ChatGPT to help you identify the right job. And there's another platform that I'm going to show you called Perplexity. It is a huge time saver. It's not going to solve the problem for you. It's not going to get you the job, but it is going to help you focus your energy and your time in a way that is most efficient and effective. And I love, there's a little adage that I once heard that sort of said, an AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who knows how to work with AI will. And so I'm telling anybody that'll listen, learn how to use these tools, not just in terms of searching for a job, but just in your day-to-day work. It is extremely, extremely useful and powerful. Okay, so let's keep going. I'm just gonna reflect back on this little word cloud here, and I'm gonna move on to the next question shortly, but it is interesting to see kind of the things that are coming out of this. And it is what you'd expect, actually. There's nothing on the page that's jumping out as weird. I'm just reading it, burden of disease, limited resources, interesting.
I like seeing some of the social determinants in their absence of employment, poverty. That's close to my heart, of course.
Yeah, mental health problems, antimicrobial resistance going to be a huge problem. Definitely. I mean, AMR is, let me just say, if you're interested in global health, right, or if you're finishing an MPH and you're new to the space and you don't know where the opportunity is going to be, where's going to be the growth in number of jobs, antimicrobial resistance is going to be one of the biggest challenges we face in the next 20 or 30 years. If I was 20 years younger, I would be seriously considering getting deep expertise in that space. It's interesting, it's exciting. There's so much that can be done, and it is really kind of an emerging problem, as are a lot of the things that were on the word cloud, climate change, of course, et cetera, et cetera. Very interesting. The next thing that we're going to stick onto that board, and I'm just allowing us to do this for a couple of minutes while we wait for people to kind of think of their questions. And this actually might be quite interesting. So if you've got this sort of QR code in, you can indicate the kind of organization you might be interested in working for, and then it'll sort of rank order them on the screen in front of you, and it'll be quite interesting to talk about that. But what's on the screen now, in of itself, even without the sort of the QR code interaction, it's an interesting list if you want to know where it is that you can search for jobs in the global health space. Right. I mean, I'm going to ask, maybe David, you could jump in first on the academia, just because I do think that that's a space that I don't know very well, and I imagine it's getting a job in academia. Is that hard, difficult, easy? What do you need? I'm guessing you have to have a PhD.
Again, I work with quite a few students who are maybe at the master's or PhD stage, even postdoc, and really the dream might be to jump into transition to a UN agency or to an NGO, but they want to do it on their terms and not just have to accept whatever package they can get, because some of these jobs are very, very difficult to get. Jobs that might not meet all your geographic considerations, they might be not be on the topic you're most passionate about. And so I do see some kind of biding their time, doing a PhD, doing a postdoc, and waiting for that plum opportunity to come along, or testing the waters a bit from an academic launching point, doing an internship, getting into the right networks, and really making sure that that's a transition that they want to make, as well as getting an inside track on those jobs. So some of these are maybe what you'd like to work for, but that's not necessarily the path that you might want to take.
Yeah, I got you.
There.
I got you. And one of the things about, if you've got the time, energy, patience, and I never did a PhD, by the way, and because it always scared me. I mean, it is really, like, it's a huge undertaking, but if you do a PhD, you walk away with deep technical knowledge and expertise in a particular area that makes you extremely marketable where that set of expertise is needed. And I think people that do PhDs often walk away with more than just like a deep knowledge in one subject. They walk away with transferable skills that they can apply often in unrelated areas, but the skill set comes with them. And that applies to anything, really. I mean, if you work hard at something, you develop a skill set. It's really important to find ways of making that transferable and applicable in different jobs, because you're unlikely just to have one job for the rest of your life. A couple of the other ones here, these are just words on the screen, but just so that in case people aren't familiar with them, I mean, when I've got NGOs there, I mean both national and global NGOs. So you've got big ones, you've got obviously you've got CHIME, you've got MSF, and you've got these huge organizations that engage with multiple countries. But you've also got kind of within country specific NGOs that deal with local problems, and they are also extremely rewarding to work for and work with. So NGOs is definitely an interesting space. UN agencies, that's WHO, UNICEF. In the UN agency space, I'll also say this. There are UN agencies whose remit doesn't seem to be necessarily just health, or even related to health. But when you look under the hood, there's definitely a health component. For example, the World Trade Organization. So if you're interested in health, you might not be looking at the WTO as a place that you might want to work. But in actual fact, the WTO does a lot of work on the TRIPS agreement, the trade-related aspects of intellectual property, which of course has got a lot to do with pharma and drugs and access to medicines and the extent to which people can and can't buy and afford, et cetera, et cetera. There are a lot of people working in the health space, in the global health space, that work for or with the World Trade Organization. Other examples of the World Bank. You might not think of the World Bank as a place to go to for a global health job. In actual fact, the World Bank do buckets of work in the global health space, and a lot of good work. So you got to definitely look past just the WHO and UNICEF in terms of UN agencies that you might want to work for. I worked for the WHO for 2 years, and I absolutely loved it. I mean, it was super rewarding. I'm still really good friends with the people that I work with there. It was certainly one of the most exciting 2 years of my life. Actually, every 2 years seems to be exciting, but for different reasons.
Next chapters. But yeah, even on WHO, that conversation, I mean, WHO is not a monolithic entity. You have Geneva for headquarters. You have regional offices. You have local country offices. And your experience in these behemoth organizations of the UN will be very, very different if you're working at a highly local level versus regional versus supranational. So this is more like what I would expect. I think a lot of people joining our channels here are from low and middle income countries, and I know for a lot of them, the dream is to land a UN agency job, which is seen for some as not your ticket to a boring life, but also a ticket to a very secure life doing richly rewarding work. That is kind of shaking up how I would have thought to see things. Any surprises here for you?
Not really. I think people often undervalue how exciting it can be to work for a funding agency. So I worked for the World Cancer Research Fund. I was the head of science and research there. Absolutely loved it. Unitaid, actually, funny enough, is a funding agency. So your job working at Unitaid is focusing on where do you disperse money to kind of support these projects that impact on market dynamics for products. So it's a funding agency, but you really are in the thick of global health in that space, and it's really exciting. You're working with the implementing partners. Absolutely exciting. So funding agencies shouldn't be underestimated. Private sector, people often don't think of the private sector as a place that they can look for work if they're interested in global health. There's a lot of the big consulting companies, McKinsey, Boston Consulting, Bain and Company, they all have a global health practice. And in those practices, they provide a lot of support to organizations like the WHO, et cetera, et cetera. So,
you
can often end up working in the same office, but just through a different route. And I was going to say,
I've been very, very surprised by how much private consultants and private consulting firms are engaged with UN agencies. Really surprised. Really nice to see though, Greg. I still will vote for the academic side because just personally, I'm biased. I think it's fantastic to avoid the pitfalls and trappings of some of the bureaucracy, to be able to engage in a more independent way to support NGOs, support the mission of the UN without being enmeshed in some of the challenges. Oh, we've got a lot of comments
We've got
coming through. This is great.
questions that are popping in. And so, because this is live and we haven't seen these questions, you'll forgive us if we kind of sort of stumble away and sort of clumsily kind of try and identify questions that we can ask. We won't be able to get to all of them. In actual fact, as I've pulled this up, I know that there were many questions that have already kind of come and gone, and we haven't had a chance to answer. Somebody asked, can we re-share the QR code? It's on the screen at the moment. Sorry, the QR code disappeared when we went to the Mentimeter. So that's on the screen at the moment.
It's sometimes tricky if you're watching on your phone to scan the code. Sometimes you have to try to click it if you're missing it.
Yeah, it's not always that easy. And so, David, if you see any questions that you want to jump in
I'm
on.
just seeing a mutual colleague friend, Krishna, joining in, who's interested in the equity dimensions of commercial determinants of health, mainly in low-income countries. I mean, I think sometimes what happens is, if you look at what people said as the big global issues, commercial determinants of health wasn't even on the board. And I think this is one of the challenges. So when Krishna is thinking 2 steps ahead, well, what about the equity issues of commercial determinants of health? I think you'll find that one of the exciting things is sometimes people working within these organizations are multiple steps ahead and more advanced in their conversations about global health than the rest of us, which again is even why in your job search to really do your research and do your homework to figure out where the conversation is in the organization you're going to, and if that's the conversation you want to be a part of and contribute your valuable time and energy to moving the meter forward.
100%.
But yeah, Christian, thanks for saying that. We'd have to do a whole session on the equity dimensions, which will go beyond here.
I can click on a question and have the question come up. So if people don't mind me kind of making their question public, you know, this is a real question that people have: is they're studying, they're spending money doing a master's in public health, and they're concerned about not getting a job after having made that investment. And this is really part of, I think, a broader question that often comes up in these conversations, which is, how do I get that first job? You know, like, you know, all of the jobs that are advertised require of you to have experience. And how do I get the experience if nobody will give me a job? And I think, I mean, all of us that have been working in the global health space at some point were sort of faced with that exact dilemma. And I absolutely empathize with the frustration there. There's a couple of things you can do. And this is just, I'm not saying that this is easy, but I'm just saying that all is not lost. There's internships, and many of the internships nowadays are paid. Now, they're not paid terribly well, but there's an effort afoot to make sure that you're paid enough that you can at least survive, right? So you're not going to go out and buy a house, but you can survive and get that experience that'll then set you up to get the next job, and you also get to network. I did an internship at the WHO in about 2002, and it was off the back, and in those days they weren't paid, and that was quite objectionable because the WHO had interns that were unpaid, and it meant that basically all the interns were from, you know, places where people could afford to go and live in Geneva for 6 months without getting paid. So it wasn't really a representative cohort of the, you know, what they should. I think WHO internships now do get a stipend. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong about that. But when I see a lot of the UN agency internships, I do see that they're saying that they are paid a stipend. So that's important. The other thing you can do, which I always say to people, is just try and start something. Just do something of your own volition to get experience. You know, like you could start a YouTube channel, start a podcast, start a blog. You know, in about 2003, I started an academic journal, and it actually wasn't that difficult. You know, you can start something, and that then translates into experience on your CV. It's something. You know, what you don't want to have is a blank CV in which you've done nothing. Yes, David.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on that. I like that idea of starting something. I know this is sometimes hard. Again, I also was in the WHO unpaid internship category when back in the day in 2005. I do like, if you have the free time, if you can find 5 to 10 hours, volunteer for an NGO in your space.
Yeah.
They're often strapped for cash, strapped for resources, and somebody coming saying, "Hey, I've got a laptop. I know some
Yeah.
statistics." They'll be like, "It's a godsend," and can plug you in. That can sometimes be more meaningful experience than going
Yeah.
to the UN and making coffee or doing something
Yeah.
that looks great on the CV, but you're not walking away with that rich, textured, thick experience
Yeah.
that you want.
Agreed.
And I think there's a lot to be said for doing something that you're excited by, proud of, but that's also going to make you stand out and be able to tell good stories when you go in interviews down the road. So um,
Yeah. No,
that's
absolutely.
what I mean. NGO was the second on the list, and I think that's the easy. I find that NGOs like that are often easier to
Yeah.
get the internships
And
at.
in terms of, if you don't know, you're dead right. There are things that NGOs and these small organizations that don't have a big budget would love to have an extra pair of hands helping them out with, and a volunteer would be well received. And you could actually bring real skills into this. I mean, so you're not talking about making coffee. You could offer to do a lit review, for example, and
Absolutely.
that is tremendously valuable. I mean, they will find that extremely valuable because they want to be doing evidence-based work. They want to know what's in the literature. Usually they don't have the time and bandwidth to be looking at the literature. If you do that for them, they will love you forever. And you never know, it could translate into a job. I absolutely agree with you there.
Speaking of literature reviews, I just have to do some shameless self-advertising, guys. On my YouTube channel, we've got a step-by-step free course on systematic reviews. So if you want to be able to go to these agencies and contribute, that you can do a literature review of publishable quality, check out that free playlist. Our
Yeah.
students have gotten great
And
results
actually,
publishing with it.
David, I'm going to just answer the question that's on the screen now, but then if you could just take a minute and tell people about the service that you provide in terms of people that are in academia or doing research, because I know you do some great work there. But just to answer this question, most UN jobs require experience with any UN agency. With this in mind, this is the same question. I don't think that's really true. I don't think UN
Yeah.
agencies require that you have experience in another UN agency. Usually they, in my experience, like the WHO require a certain number of years experience working in that field. So if you're
Yes.
wanting to work in sort of, tuberculosis, blah, 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 they want to know that you've got experience working in that space, but it doesn't necessarily need to be with a UN agency. And I will tell you this.
Exactly. Yeah, Greg, just seconding you there. Yes.
If you applying for a job at the WHO, and the job specs say you need 5 years experience, I promise you need 5 years experience. If you've got 4 years and 7 months, you're off the list. And the reason is these applications get screened by someone in HR.
Yes.
They're going to make sure that there is absolutely, you've ticked every box. So don't think, look, I don't have quite the 5 years experience, but I've got like a whole PhD in the space, and you've got a whole lot of quality. I promise you will not get that job if you don't tick that box. And maybe, I don't care if it's fair or not fair. I'm just saying this is the way the world is.
I've seen people try to take liberties too with their experience and be like, well, I'm going to count these extra years as loosely related, and even that hasn't made it through the HR filter before, Greg. When people do that, so that's dead on arrival. Don't apply to things that you're not qualified for. Would be my advice there.
Okay, this question that's on the screen at the moment, I put it up just because
let me
the bottom part of the question, David, you may have some insights into a PhD and a DRPH, and my understanding is a DRPH is a kind of a combination of sort of quite a rigorous thesis, but not quite PhD style thesis, but combined with some sort of in-house experience in some kind of organization. I'm guessing that a DRPH sets you up for a career in academia if you want it, but also sets you up for a career in an organization if you want it. So, but I don't know that space very well. Do you have any insights into that?
So, I always personally have liked to keep my options open. So, when possible, I do recommend the PhD. The DPH has a built-in internship component to it. So you're tapping into the institution's networks and resources and lining up an internship and a kind of a practical experience. It's a little bit less academic heavy on the thesis. And when you do your PhD, you are locking yourself into a public health track, and if you know that, that's great. That's okay. But I know many people who have their whole worlds have changed, and they've moved from global health into economics, into energy. And so I just personally, I like keeping options open. It's not to say that these are bad programs or a bad idea. That's just the advice I give. Always, I like to start though from your individual goals. Reverse engineer. Where do you want to be in the next 5 years? And what other people have gone down that path, and have they been able to get there following that path? It's not to say you can't chart a new path. It's just a whole lot harder to chart a new path than to follow one that's already well trodden.
Yeah, agreed. David, I'm just going to take a pause on the questions and answers and suggest, would you tell us a little bit about the work that you do in supporting people that are doing master's level and PhD level studies? Because I know, people find research scary, and I know that the work you do is absolutely amazing just in terms of giving people a foot up. So just give us the
one thing I learned as a professor over the years at Harvard, Cambridge, and Oxford is that a lot of students were really struggling, falling behind, not getting the support they needed, and eventually getting burnt out and frustrated and not even finishing the program. And what I found was really separating the students who really got on the proverbial fast track and really thrived, and those who were falling behind didn't have to do so much with their ability or even their willingness to work hard, but had more to do with getting the right support and guidance to truly thrive. And what I've seen at a lot of institutions now is that the faculty are overstretched, and students are often just floundering around, doing something the first time, not knowing what to do. So what I did is learn from our experiences and created a fast track system that can help students go from zero to publishing their first paper in 3 months, even if they've struggled before or have no research experience at all. And those publications, especially in the global health space, are like money in the bank. They open up a lot of career doors. They help you stand out. They'll tick the box for the PhD if you want. They'll help you feel confident that you have established yourself as a world-leading expert in an area. So if anybody's interested in that, do get in touch. We have a Facebook group called Fast Track Grad. We'll drop the link below to this video after. But yeah, thanks for sharing that, Greg. We've had a lot of students chart exciting career paths in this space, including both PhD and DRPH.
Okay, well, if I ever do a PhD, you will be the first person I call, David. I just want to talk you guys through. I'm going to get into how to use AI to identify jobs that you might be interested in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen again and just walk you through what you can do. Okay, so you don't know what organizations you can apply for. The solution to that is very easy, and you won't mind me giving a quick pitch. My website, learnmore365.com. If you click on free resources, it's going to take you here. These are free resources, and you can filter them with these little boxes here. One of them is job search, global health jobs. We've also got a new one, which are internships. I don't know if it's up here. And I know it got published today, so it's just not on the screen right now. But there's internships as well that's going up. I think it is up. But anyway, if you click on the cheat sheet and hit download, it's going to take you to this. And here, these are live URLs that'll take, if you click on that, WHO careers, for example, here are a lot of organizations. It's going to take you to the WHO page where you can search for a job. Now, here's the little trick that I want to teach people. There's a lot of jobs, right? The WHO posts a whole bunch of jobs, and you can filter them a little bit. So you've got, you can filter them by, professional and full-time, and there's a consulting work that you might want to do, etc. But whatever you do, you're going to land up with a whole bunch of options. And it's quite difficult to read through the details of the terms of reference of every single one of them. I mean, you can spend an entire day just like plowing through terms of references of jobs, looking for something that which you think you would be a good fit for. And this is just the WHO. Do that same process, with a string of like 7 or 8 other organizations, and it's taking over your life. So here's my little trick. Each of these jobs, right, you can right click on it and you can copy the link, the address link, right? And you're going to do that with a few of them, and you're going to bring them into ChatGPT, right? So here I've got ChatGPT, and what I've done here, and this is just an example of the sort of thing you can do with AI. I've uploaded my CV, and I've said to ChatGPT, this is my prompt. And here are the links to the jobs that I'm interested in looking at, right? The links, those are all the links down there. This is my prompt, but you can make a different prompt. This is just something I put together quickly, and it kind of worked. I've uploaded my CV. Please look at them look at the terms of reference found at the following links. So those are the links below. And let me know which of these jobs I'm best suited for in terms of a match between my skills and experience and the requirements of the job. Create a table that has 3 columns. In the first column, include the job title, including the area of work, and a very short description of the job. In the second column, include a high-level bullet points that summarize how my background maps against the job requirements. And in the final column, provide a rank score based on the order of the most appropriate job to the least appropriate job, and a 1-sentence reason for that ranking. Then I've said here, take the job that ranks highest and write a cover letter that I can use in an application for that job. Please output the cover letter as a Word document. Okay, and so then I pasted in all of the links from a number of these jobs. I just chose them at random, by the way. I didn't look at them very carefully. This is just to illustrate. Pasted those links in, and voila, here's a nice little table. The job that ranked highest was health protection surveillance location. So I've just finished working as the National Director for Health Protection Surveillance in Ireland. So I did a good job of identifying a job that matched very neatly against my particular skills and experience. And if we go to the least ranked job, was a data analyst, and its reason for ranking at 6th is, while competent in data analysis, my primary experience is more in leadership and strategic roles. So I don't have roles working in data analysis, and it picked that up by looking at my CV. So it's a nice way to filter through the noise, find the jobs that are most appropriate for you to spend your time and energy looking at, and then you can look at those jobs and really, really carve out a lot of time to work on the jobs where you're most likely to have an output. Then I've asked it just to write a cover letter just to show you how it can do that. I mean, it's easy peasy lemon squeezy. I've said output it as a Word document. So you click on this, download the Word document, and then edit it into something that you might find useful. Then the next thing I've done is I've said, okay.
Wait, Greg,
okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
I mean, this is incredible. This saves so much time. Can you imagine how long it would be to study carefully the terms and the fine print, and you just lock and load and ChatGPT did the heavy lifting for you?
Yeah, it's amazing.
I
mean, if you're not doing this, you're competing with people that are doing this. So get onto that level playing field. Be the person that's using the technology.
They're getting the unfair advantage over you if you're not using this now publicly available tech.
Yeah, it's cheap, it's free. I mean, I use the paid for version, but the free version is pretty much exactly the same. And the reason I say to people is use this technology just in day-to-day, just whatever you're doing, try and use it, practice using the prompts, so that when you really need to use the prompts for something that's important to you, you've gotten good at and used to how to engage with ChatGPT and what you can and can't ask it, and how much confidence you can have in what it produces. Yes. So that I love it. I find that, and I've never used this in a job search for myself, but I mean, I way back when I was really looking for work in the global health space, I would have absolutely loved this. Then
this is to me, it's just a game changer in searching for jobs. I mean, the next level, Greg, we got to figure out how we can automate all this to sift through all the UN listings. Because remember, sometimes we think about, I'm applying for a job, I'm going to apply for the job. But remember, on the other side, there are people recruiting who want to find that good fit. And that's why we talk about the network. The network effect is there's a few things going on with the network effect. Oftentimes, what I was always told, and it's really true in my life, is that your second order network. So your first order network is your immediate friends and family. The second order network, kind of the friends of the friends, that's a kind of a magic concentric circle around you. That's even bigger. That's often a key for jobs. And there's an effect of them notifying you about what jobs are available, but also them kind of getting other people in touch with you, or notifying other people that, hey, wait a second. And that's the side you might not always see. You might see, that friend recommended me to apply for something, but they also will maybe speak about you to others who are out there recruiting and looking for you as that perfect person.
And those are the people that build up your reputation. You know what I mean? What your thought, how people think of you is a function of those conversations that are happening in the second and third, down the way. Then in the same little, if we walk through this experience that I'm pointing to here, let's say that that job in surveillance is the one where we sort of think, okay, the WHO job's interesting to me. I want to start getting ready or apply for that job. There's another tool here called Perplexity. It's a lovely search engine. And what's nice about it, in this particular case, I've said, please provide information about the WHO in terms of the vision, mission, priorities, challenges, and stakeholders, and also provide information about what they are doing in the area of work as it pertains to this job advert. And I've copied in the link of the job that was recommended by ChatGPT. And so then Perplexia goes and looks at that job, looks at the question that I've asked, and generates an answer. But what I like about this is it generates an answer that has, look at these little references. So wherever it has found the information all over the internet, you can click on the reference and go and read the primary source and find out what's actually being said there. So it's a really nice way when you're preparing for an interview. You need to know all about the organization that you're applying for, and not just the organization, but the field, the space. What's happening in that space, so you can talk confidently and comfortably. And this is a great way to get yourself up to speed quite quickly. And then the last little trick, and this is again, we're back to ChatGPT. Let's assume now you've been offered an interview. They're offering you an interview and you're preparing for the interview, and people find preparing for interviews quite difficult. Now, especially if you don't do them often, you haven't done an interview for years and it's a little bit nerve-wracking. This isn't the whole picture, but this is a great way to start. Again, I've uploaded my CV and I've put in this prompt. I've said, I'm preparing for a job interview. For the job description in the link below, and I've again pasted in the same link. Given the requirements of the job, please list 20 possible questions that could be asked. Provide a recommended answer to the question using information from my CV. Provide the output as a table that has 3 columns. The column should be, number 1, the competency required. Number 2, the question that could be asked. And number 3, a recommended answer. Keep the answers that you recommend short, but make reference to my experience. And the reason that I'm saying in this prompt, keep the recommended answer short, is really the answer is going to be something that you want to work on. Like, you want the list of questions. That's important here. A short answer that it recommends, that's fine. You can use it. But really, you want to output this as a Word document, and then you want to spend your time tweaking those answers, thinking about them, milling over them, chewing over them, and getting them into shape. So you don't want a long answer from ChatGPT here. That's got to come from you. Anyway, so if I run that prompt, it outputted, these are the competencies, in the left-hand column, questions that could be asked, and then answers, so competency, leadership, how have you demonstrated leadership in your previous roles? Recommended answer, as the director of the Health Protection Surveillance Center, I led a team that enhanced surveillance, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so, none of this is too complicated, but it is a great starting point for your preparation when you're getting ready for an interview. And then, I asked it for 20 questions there. You could ask it for 100, or, what I mean?
Greg, I love this because a lot of students ask me, I've got an interview, how do I prep? And it's almost like there's a bit of a blank. They might not have a lot of interviewing experience, and so they don't even really know what they don't know. And this is just a great starting point to trigger your thinking, so you'll feel more confident going in the room. Because ChatGPT's algorithm is tapping tons of its experience from interviews that I can find on the interwebs to help anticipate those questions. So I really like this use generally of ChatGPT as kind of being your co-pilot in the corner, stress testing your ideas. And if you have an answer to a question, you can even follow up on that and get feedback from it on how you're answering that potential question. Because you can see that that's a starting point. But once you get good with ChatGPT, you can keep that dialogue going.
You can have a dialogue. I think that's the key to using these AIs, is to develop a back and forth. I sometimes write a document, I take the document, I drop it into ChatGPT, and I say, is there something I'm missing here? Like, what am I not thinking about? And let's say it comes up with 10 things, and 8 of them are like, like, I'm not going to get out of bed for that. But 2 of them are like, actually, that's really interesting. And I revisit the document. So you got to take it all with a pinch of salt.
There are certain things that are invariably still quite human that will do better than AI. But I find now one of the things that, especially a lot of researchers I work with, have trouble finding a topic. And now ChatGPT can identify a menu of topics that
Yeah,
again it can just shorten the list. You might be able to apply your values and pick which is the best one.
yeah,
But it can shrink that search space to save you a whole lot of time. So it can do the things that a computer can do better, so you can focus on the things that you as a human can do best.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely agree. We're going to go back to some questions, but before we do, use the QR code if you haven't, and we're going to move on to in that QR code. I'm actually going to just take us
Oh,
here.
look. Okay, UN's way on top now. This just reminds me too. I think a lot of people have the dream about the UN because of the name,
Yeah,
um, but yeah, I think it is really important again that the path to the UN does not necessarily have to be directly starting in the UN.
I agree, and it almost never
That was a
does.
It
Yeah,
almost never does, and so I think some people feel disappointed. Oh, I dreamt of the UN job, I didn't get the UN job. Yeah, but people
yeah,
on average in this generation are changing their careers every three to
yeah,
5 years, or if you're Greg Martin, every 2 years. So
yeah, yeah.
I know I've changed. I was at a point where people thought I was always moving. I was moving cities every 2 years, going to the next institution. So you don't have to get your dream job out the gate.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I agree. And if you're young, what you're wanting to do is clock up experience and get a rep. I often say to people that are young, like you need to be the first person in the door and the last person to leave because you're at an age where you can do that. You know, a couple of years down the line, it's I mean, I've got 3 kids, and the job that I've just changed from when I was working as a director at the HPSC, um, I was still mostly the first or one of the first people in the door and one of the last people to leave. But that was sort of an unusual set of circumstances. If you're young and in your 20s and early 30s, you can absolutely like get up early, get in the door first, work hard, use that time while you've got that additional space. I'm just going to move this along. So if you've got your phone now, before we go back to the questions, um, David and myself would both love to do more of these live streams. And can you pop in anything that you'd like to see addressed? I mean, we've got an idea of what to talk about, but I'd love to hear more about what other people think. So stick your ideas in about what you'd like us to talk about, and we can then use that to kind of do some thinking and planning and come back to you with kind of meaningful content. I'm going to hit questions again. And here was a good one.
We've got a long list. I'm not able to comment directly, Greg, but if you could single out a few of them.
Yeah, this is, so you talked briefly about mastering research for global health students. What are you thinking about data analysis? It depends where you want to land. And David, you'll probably have some thoughts on this as well. I love data. And I'm obsessed with R, and I've got a YouTube channel, R Programming 101. I mean, I absolutely love working with data. But in actual fact, in my day job, I don't really get much time to do any analysis of data. I usually need to kind of ask people to do that on my behalf. But that's kind of a function of where I am professionally at the moment. When I was younger, I might have done more of the sort of actual data analysis, but I do love it. And so where I can, I like to kind of get into that. But it does depend a lot on where you are and what kind of work you'd like to do. If you think you might land up in something like surveillance, where you are literally trying to keep an eye on, like, the cases of measles and what's happening with bird flu, et cetera, having a strong handle on data and data analysis is useful and important. But there's lots of people, even working in those spaces, that don't necessarily have those skills. But David, any thoughts about mastering data analytics?
I love investing the time and energy in advanced data analytics. Increasingly people need to be able to speak data, and if you can get to a point in your career like Greg, you still need it because you're going to need to supervise complex teams and know the ins and outs of data. And if you don't have that skill set, you'll almost feel like you don't have your feet on the ground. You won't feel as confident in the room with everybody else when they do start speaking data. So I certainly recommend it. There's the other point I want to make here is that often when you're at this stage, you have the time and energy to invest in yourself. For example, I learned SAS and Stata and all sorts of programming languages, and then R came along and I was slower to transition to it. The point is, you're going to get a set of skills now that will slowly erode and atrophy over time because you won't have the same time to renew and continuously invest in your skills in the same way you can now. So if you can get that strong data foundation, that's going to last you a good 10, 20 years. It's going to be much, you're not going to be able to go get that foundation 10, 20 years down the road. So I think it's Procivi. Sorry if I got your name wrong. Strongly recommend you invest in that no matter what path you go into.
Yeah. I also think, even if you don't land up doing any serious analysis of data as a professional in whatever career you land up in, you will always need to be able to read and understand the evidence base that informs the work that you're doing. So if you've got a reasonable understanding of statistics and inferential statistics, when you read these academic papers, they'll make sense to you. You'll be able to see, when people talk about a p-value or something, you will know and understand what is meant by that. And hopefully even on things like linear regression, you'll see results and they'll make sense to you. So you didn't do the analysis, but that analysis was done for people like you to digest and use to inform decisions that you make. So you'll find a working knowledge of analysis useful. The other thing that I find useful, and this is a little obsession, I love data visualization, and I'm absolutely obsessed with ggplot2 in R. I think if I could spend all day, every day, like just creating plots, that's what I would do. Unfortunately, no one's going to pay me to do that. But quite often, I will, in the context of my work, be wanting to make a point or do a presentation or advocate for something, and I'll have access to the data, and I'll want to have a plot or a graph or some sort of data visualization. And nowadays you can do animations and 3D plots, and you can do all sorts of exciting things that serves my purpose, and no one else has done that. Okay, then that's when I actually need to step back and just write the code myself, produce the plot, stick it into whatever presentation I'm giving. So I do find that knowing how to kind of work with data, even if it's not part and parcel of my day job, I still find it useful. So I would. I just love data, so I get it that not everybody does, but definitely have at the very least a working knowledge of data, of inferential statistics, and it'll serve you well. I think it's a good question.
Yeah, very good question. Greg, I'm mustard keen to see what people are saying on the topics that they want to hear from us. I know that's going to be a bit.
Okay, should we go back to that?
We're always continuously looking for ways to better support the community. So that feedback's really helpful to us. So we've got a few here.
Getting mentorship. That's a good one.
Yeah.
There are organizations.
We have a couple training videos on how to reach and leverage effective mentors.
Yeah, and I can't remember the names of them, but there are organizations that actually focus specifically on joining the dots between kind of people with experience in the global health space and people that are looking for mentorships. And I can't think of their names, but that might be an interesting thing to build into a live stream show where we bring one of these organizations in or somebody that's in that space and just talk about, how do you get a mentor if you are new to this? Digital health, that's big.
Yeah. Several. I mean, we could do a whole session on all these, so I don't want to dive into them now. But this is really we listen to you. This is really great and serious. And my camera has just decided to bug out in 2 seconds. We do listen to you, even if our camera gets shut off. Well, that's quirky. Give me 2 seconds to set that up. Greg and I will take seriously everything you've said here. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that, and thanks for the feedback. The final question that I had on here is like, should we do a weekly public health live stream? So I'm hoping that people will respond and say yes to that, because this is kind of quite fun. So I just stuck this in at the end. So look at that.
Okay.
So people are saying yes. So
somebody's going to be quirky and say no because my camera keeps disappearing. I don't know what's going on here.
And there's a somewhat option. I didn't even know that I had a somewhat as an option in there. So I'm not even sure what that means.
What is a somewhat live health stream?
I'm not even sure how to do a somewhat live stream, but anyway, that's interesting. So we'll let people vote on that and come back to it. David, your camera's back. You're back.
I'm back. Okay.
Okay. So I'm just trying to look at the questions if there's anything else we want to jump in on. Here's one. What is the name of your Facebook group? You mentioned it.
It's called Fast Track Grad, and my assistant Marina will set you up with some of our best training. We cover a lot of soft skills, especially around writing. through to harder skills, although not quite as good as Greg's R course. So getting started with R, I'm plugging you on that, Greg. I recommend
Thank you,
everybody
sir.
to go to yours because it is awesome, and wish I would have had that when I was converting over to R.
Yeah, I am kind of obsessed with R. I think I annoy people because I talk about it so much, but
But it also changes the way you think about data. So it's more than just a language. Learning this is learning a way of thinking about, here in this case, data frames and vectors, things that in other languages you don't think about in quite the same way. Um,
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah. There's someone's just asked, is it possible to get a job at the World Bank, global health job? Yes. So absolutely, the World Bank do have a very strong global health and public health branch of work.
So I would argue that the World Bank is the much bigger funder of global health than the WHO. Just
Yeah, yeah,
surely on budget. So in some ways, the question shouldn't be you be looking for the World Health Organization for a global health job. You should be looking at the World Bank because
yeah,
just by sheer funding, they have a whole lot more going on in that space.
yeah. And I didn't ever work for the World Bank, but I certainly know a lot of people that have, and I've got friends that still work at the World Bank, and by all accounts, their experience is fantastic. You know, the work they do is really meaningful work. You're working with super people. I mean, everybody in the World Bank that's in that space. They're also dealing with global health issues from an interesting perspective. You know, so they're thinking about developing countries and economic and social development. So when they're thinking about health problems, they're thinking about them in the context of how a nation state is sort of emerging, but hopefully out of poverty into sort of a low and middle income and then a middle income country, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really exciting work. You know, the work they
Yeah.
do, I think, really makes a big difference.
I haven't always agreed with some of their macroeconomic policies
Yeah,
in the past, although they've
same
come a long
here.
way. But I
Yeah,
do like their approach, as they many of their staff tend to think like economists in a quite rigorous way, using data and evidence to guide practical decisions. And so I've recommended a lot of my PhD students in the past to go on their junior fellows programs, which can be a really nice step. I do think for the World Bank, it is helpful to have more advanced training, and they tend to privilege more people coming in with PhDs, in my experience and from what I've seen.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I'm just seeing some new questions that are popping in there. Let's see what this one looks like. What is your most meaningful job, which you felt you have really made a difference in the lives and the health of individuals? I mean, that's a lovely question, and I could spend a lot of time thinking about that and give. But to be honest, for me and David, you can answer the question separately. For me, I would say every job has been meaningful, but in a slightly different way. And it's had a different group of people that we've been focused on. And so it's very difficult to sort of say one was more or less meaningful than the other. I've actually found, you know, when I was working at the WHO, there was a lovely sense of being involved with sort of big picture problems that, you know, you sort of thought would have ramifications in multiple countries. When I was working with the Clinton Foundation, I was, you know, even though I was in the global office, we were much closer to the ground, and I was, you know, working with the country offices, and there was a deeper sense of being closer to the coal face of where the problems were that we were trying to solve. I'm now living in Ireland, and my day job is very much focused on, you know, the health of the people in Ireland, and now I'm close to the coal face because I am one of them. I'm actually living in the community that I'm trying to help and support. And so at each of those stages, there's been a lot of meaning to me, but in very different ways. And I felt each of them were tremendously exciting and fulfilling. Like I've loved my career in public health, you know, at every step of the way. So, you know, I don't have a nice clean answer to that. It's a little bit of a fuzzy answer. But David, any answer from yourself?
It's a deep philosophical question. How do you measure the impact of your life, and especially if you've committed that to bending the arc of history to contribute to the public good? I think some people are drawn, when I was just starting out, want to be a doctor and make a big impact, I thought, on the lives of the few, and then public health, maybe a small impact on the lives of the many. Personally, I've always taken more that population approach, and I have to say, Greg, I really love what we're doing here to try to democratize access to knowledge and education, to provide opportunities for people who might not have had them to engage on a path that might not have been available to them otherwise. So if you are getting value from this content and this 100% free training that we offer, do let other people know, because it does help us serve other people who might not otherwise benefit, who might not know about what we're trying to do in global health here. So I'd say I think now digitally there are opportunities to touch and transform the lives of others in ways that were unthinkable before.
Yeah. We're coming quite close to the end of the hour, and I do see that there's a couple of additional questions that have been in there. I'm going to suggest we perhaps just do one or two more questions and then call it a day, but say to people, look, come back this time, same place, same time next week, and we'll do another one of these. And maybe we'll have a specific theme, but
let's pick one of those topics that
exactly
had the most responses. Greg, I'd say very simply, we'll take the topic that has the most responses.
We'll do that. We'll definitely do that. Question here: how do you transfer from clinical practice to global health? I mean, this is my life. I worked as a medical doctor and then moved across to global health. For me, it was a smooth transition because I was involved as a clinician in issues that really. My introduction to public health really started with working in maternal and child health in South Africa, where HIV and the transmission of HIV from mothers to children to babies was a big issue. And it was a seamless move from clinical medicine into public health and then into global health. And answer to I think what I'm really trying to get at, or what might help you in terms of what you're trying to ask is, as a medical doctor, what is your value proposition in the public health space? And I think that you need to use the fact that you've got that clinical background to inform what it is that you're going to take a deeper interest in. And I mean, there isn't an easy answer to that question. The one thing I will say is this: people that are interested in public health don't need to be medical doctors, and that's quite important. Most people working in public health, if you go to the WHO, actually, most people aren't medical doctors. But if you are a medical doctor, there's no reason why you shouldn't have an exciting career in public health and global health. And your clinical knowledge of what happens at the bedside is useful. So don't discount that at all. There's a question that I thought would be best answered by yourself about PhDs. Let me just try and find it for you. How do you transfer? No, there was a nice PhD style question. This is it. I know your camera's died again, but
I think my battery's running a little bit low. I was recording this morning. Okay, there we go.
Okay, there's a question that somebody that sounds like they supervise PhDs.
Oh, it's Krishna. Krishna, we've got to bring on sometime with us, Greg. Difficulty crafting effective personal statements and succeeding in job interviews.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the problem again is that there are some tools, and I know you've got some as well, Greg, that we can make available. Just many are just lost at sea. They don't know what they don't know and don't know where to start. And Greg, you've really helped show how ChatGPT can be a great point to feel free and safe to ask a question, not knowing anything. But do tap some of our guides on personal statements and definitely some of Greg's guides on thriving in job interviews, because they're just going to give you that unfair advantage over everybody else, and all's fair.
Yeah. Well, it's exactly an hour, so I'm going to suggest we stop there because we could carry on endlessly, and I think people have got things to do, places to go, people to meet. So thank you all for tuning in and listening to us. It's been lovely. The questions are great. The interaction's great. Thanks. David, always nice to connect with you. David and myself have never met in person. So that's still on the cards. We've got a game of squash, I think, that's scheduled.
Long overdue squash match. Although I did publish early on during my PhD in your journal.
That's true. And even before we started being in touch in this context, I always remembered that paper. It was the one about Russia, right? And the
there were a few.
There were a few. That's the one that I always remembered, and it really kind of struck me as so interesting. Is that the change in Russia and the excess burden of all-cause mortality that was associated with that in the 1990s. I think that was really interesting, and that was nearly 20 years ago, and I still remember it.
Okay, Greg, these are awesome questions. Look, let's cap it there. We will be back, Greg. I'm going to hold you to it now. We will be back next week then on Friday.
Next week, same time, same place. We'll do this again. Thanks, everybody. Take care.